Headline News, I'm Mike Kavanagh. An incomparable blow to comparable worth. A federal appeals court has overturned a Washington state comparable worth ruling. It requires employers to offer women equal pay for jobs of equal worth. The appeals court ruled an employer can follow prevailing market wages in setting salaries, even though they might underpay women. The court also ruled any wage gaps between males and females does not intentionally discriminate. Comparable worth advocates say just the opposite.
The discrimination that took place against women in jobs of like jobs, in other words, a custodian and a janitor, one being a woman and one a man, the court said you cannot discriminate against them, and they forced the marketplace to change that.
Chicago teachers are preparing lesson plans this morning. Negotiators for the teachers union and the school district have reached a tentative 2-year agreement giving teachers a 9% raise. But in 6 states, strikes will continue at least one more day. In Pawtucket, Rhode Island, for example, these teachers want a 27% raise over 3 years. A 1-year plan with a 5% raise has already been turned down. The House Agriculture Committee wants quick action on farm price support legislation. Agriculture Secretary John Block also says the government will respond to the growing problem of farm credit. Ed Alwood reports.
As recently as last month, officials of the Farm Credit Administration thought they could steer clear of serious financial troubles. But simply shifting funds and raising interest rates haven't been enough. And the Land Bank now admits it will be forced to go after federal aid, which by some estimates may run as high as $20 billion. For Congress, it's fast becoming a clear choice between letting the chief bank for farmers go broke or bail it out.
I think the system is, by some definitions, broke or going broke. But if we mean, is it going to collapse? Is it going to close its doors? No, I don't think the federal government can or will allow it.
But the Reagan administration wants less government involvement in agriculture. And even with this, Agriculture Secretary John Block stopped short of calling for a bailout.
It's vitally important that that system not only survive, because survival, of course, is important, but I want farmers to survive too.
What led to the crisis can be narrowed to 3 causes. 1, a decline in farm prices brought on by a drop in exports to foreign countries. Plus, a steep decline in the value of farm land used as collateral. In Iowa, some have dropped as much as 50% in the past 4 years. Add to that projections of a bumper crop, and you have farmers who can't repay their loans.
15% of the debt may not be collectible. That's brought about by a situation where agriculture has invested in expansion during the 70s to meet an export market that is shriveled up in the 80s.
There are widespread predictions that all of this will get worse before it gets better. The current situation is described as clouds forming on the horizon. The full fury of this crisis won't be felt for several months, we are told. Probably not until December.
Ministers Jerry Falwell and Jesse Jackson took their South African arguments to ABC's Nightline last night. Among the topics, whether U.S. policies have improved black lives. Falwell says the president's constructive engagement program allowing American investment is protecting millions of blacks from starvation. But Jackson claims American dollars only reinforce the status quo.
The investment in South Africa has not allowed due process to become a fact. It has not stopped a Reverend Alan Bozak from being arrested without charge, unable to see his wife, unable to see a lawyer. The investment there has not stopped the arrest of children 6, 8, 10, and 12 years of age.
Well, President Reagan believes, and I think very properly so, that the best way to deal with South Africa is in a gradual and coercive effort that brings about the elimination of apartheid without creating, number 1, violence and bloodshed in the land, and number 2, without giving the Marxists a toehold in the country, which, of course, as we all know, we've seen by example, they thrive upon unrest and those kinds of problems.
Violence spread to the white areas of South Africa overnight. Police say blacks and mixed-race youths hurled gasoline and stones at homes in the white suburbs of Cape Town. Whites answered with gunshots, killing 2 people. It's the first report of white neighborhood violence in a year of racial unrest. Meanwhile, a group claiming solidarity with South Africa's people is claiming responsibility for the bombings of 4 businesses west of Paris today. An anonymous caller says the companies oppress blacks in South Africa. President Reagan is scheduled to review America's policies toward South Africa today. An administration official says the president will conduct the review during a National Security Council meeting. The analysis comes as sentiment on Capitol Hill grows against the White House policy of constructive engagement. The House is already back in session, waiting for the Senate to return next week to discuss South African economic sanctions. Meanwhile, House Speaker Tip O'Neill thinks the battle for tax reform will be all uphill. The president takes his tax reform campaign to North Carolina today. U.S. officials claim a Soviet threat concerning anti-satellite weapons has little practical meaning. The Soviets say they'll end their own moratorium on ASAT if the U.S. goes ahead with a test later this month. But the defense secretary claims that the United States is only playing a game of catch-up.
The Soviets, bear in mind, have an anti-satellite system, which they've already deployed and already tested. And we are just beginning to do the testing on a system that's designed to make them very well aware of the fact that they shouldn't use theirs because they would be met with a retaliatory capability.
Federal dollars are on the way for Mississippi's hurricane-ravaged coast. President Reagan has declared the region a disaster area, clearing the way for millions in rebuilding money. A federal agency says Hurricane Elena destroyed or damaged more than 5,000 Mississippi homes and businesses and more than 20,000 others in Florida and Alabama. A rash of chemical leaks threatened 4 states yesterday. About 2,000 people in Canton, Ohio were evacuated following a hydrochloric acid leak at a metal processing plant. And leaks in New Jersey, Illinois, and Kentucky forced the evacuation of hundreds and sent many seeking medical treatment. Rita Lavelle's self-described nightmare is over. Yesterday, the former EPA official got an early release from a federal prison after serving 4.5 months on a perjury conviction. John Gibson reports.
Looking fit and trimmer after jogging her way through 5 months in a minimum security federal prison, Rita Lavelle took a deep breath of free air and accused the White House of holding her political prisoner.
I think it's the most dramatic political fragging of the 1980s. The fact that I was a woman caught in a power grab between the legislative and executive branches of our government has made it even more intriguing. Election eve politics and the political futures of many people were at stake. Someone had to take the heat, and unfortunately for me, it was Rita Lavelle.
Lavelle was supported on her Freedom Day by family and close friends. Her crimes, lying to Congress, involved charges she used the Toxic Waste Superfund for political purposes.
At this point in my life, I'm forced to admit that if certain politicians want to destroy and discredit you, they can and will use any means and seemingly can achieve any end.
Her lawyer passed out a pre-release press release and said she'd written a book about her troubles in Washington.
It's revealing.
He's looking for a publisher and a Hollywood producer. Lavelle says her prosecution has left her broke and in need of a job immediately. She claims she was ruined by Washington politics, but is she still a Republican? She said, well, it doesn't matter. She can't vote anyway because she's a convicted felon.
This is Headline News.
That's me, Dr. Billy Hayes, and I'm looking for a few good heroes who know how to have a good time.
Excuse me, would you happen to be seeking representation?
Like my friend Elvin. Now, he's a brilliant scientist, but boy, can he get down. From 7 feet to 7 inches, and he can go where no man has gone before. Then there's B. Now, he doesn't make a very good first impression, but this dude is so cool that he can freeze everything he touches. Now, Gloria is really just a sweet kid, but she can do anything she puts her mind to. Hold it! She's got powers that'll make your head spin. And then there's Johnny B. Now, he used to be a rock and roll star, but now he attracts electricity. Oh, he's got more juice in him than O.J. Simpson. And when he cuts loose, he'll just blow you away.
Together, these misfits of science will make an unbeatable team. And with Billy at the wheel, they're out to save the world and have a blast. The Misfits of Science, Fridays this fall.
The fun of this picnic is being jeopardized by improper handling of food. Certain foods spoil easily in a warm environment. That could cause salmonella poisoning with stomach pain, vomiting, or diarrhea. As a general rule, keep cold foods cold, not just cool, and hot foods hot, not just warm. Don't let spoiled foods spoil your picnic. It's just good health.
A message from Lodi Memorial Hospital.
coordinated muscle power. Fantastic precision, incredibly coordinated muscle control. We're vitally interested in muscle. We're concerned with 40 muscle diseases and over 1 million people who suffer from them. We're research and patient care. We're the Muscular Dystrophy Association. People help MDA because MDA helps people.
A gun that may have been used in a Night Stalker killing has been found in Tijuana, Mexico, but the search continues in Los Angeles for a weapon police think Richard Ramirez discarded before his arrest. Chuck Condor reports.
This apartment house in Eagle Rock, a Los Angeles suburb, is the scene of yet another murder police say was committed by Richard Ramirez. Los Angeles Police Chief Daryl Gates says Ramirez left a single fingerprint on the kitchen window screen as he entered the home of 79-year-old Jenny Vincow.
She was found by her son. She had had her throat slashed and had significant stab wounds.
The murder took place June 28th of last year. It is the earliest case yet to be attributed to the series of Night Stalker killings. Los Angeles Police Chief Daryl Gates says his men are now reopening the files on murders dating back to 1981, when Richard Ramirez is believed to have first arrived in the Los Angeles area. In San Francisco, scene of one confirmed Night Stalker slain, police are taking a second look at a double homicide from last February.
The MO, the time of day, the point of entry, how the offense was committed, those are all things that kind of point to Mr. Ramirez.
Police continue their search in Los Angeles for a gun they say Ramirez may have discarded moments before his arrest Saturday.
2 boys are being charged with setting Monday's Passaic, New Jersey fire. The 2 boys, ages 12 and 13, have reportedly admitted starting a dumpster fire that quickly spread to a nearby factory building. One death is blamed on that fire, which tore through 4 city blocks, leaving hundreds homeless and thousands more without jobs. A hearing on Friday will determine whether to try the two boys as adults. No parole for one member of the Charles Manson cult family. That's the word to Patricia Krenwinkel from a California parole board. Krenwinkel is serving a life sentence for her part in 7 1969 killings, including the murder of actress Sharon Tate. Krenwinkel will get another parole hearing in 1988. The parole board based its decision on psychiatric reports and the cruelty of the Manson murders.
Ms. Krenwinkel showed no remorse during the course of the murders or after the murders. As a matter of fact, after the Tate murders, when she got back to the getaway car, all she could talk about was how her hand hurt because of hitting the victim's bones when she was stabbing them.
Some jailed Cuban refugees in Atlanta have been on a hunger strike for a week now, but lawyers and authorities can't agree on why they're striking. Peter Arnett has more.
Atlanta's federal penitentiary houses nearly 2,000 Cuban criminals awaiting deportation to Cuba. But agreements to return these unwanted refugees who arrived on the Mariel boat lift of 1980 have been broken. Their future is in doubt. Prison warden Jack Hanbury said the reason for the hunger strike was frustration.
They're frustrated from the length of time they've been locked up, and still no answer to this whole riddle of when they may be released.
Legal defense lawyer William Thompson says the prisoners' grievances go deeper.
It's my understanding that the present hunger strike may be directed more at the physical conditions of the prison as opposed to the specific fact that the Cubans are being detained.
The 1,860 Cubans at the Atlanta prison have been under tight security since they staged a series of protests last November. The current hunger strike that began last week so far involves about 1/10 of the inmates. Prison officials said they force-fed 103 prisoners on Tuesday by pouring liquid nutrients through nose tubes to the stomach. A total of 201 Cubans were returned home earlier this year under the now defunct deportation agreement. Some went willingly, but now increasing numbers would prefer to go back home.
If the prospect is staying indefinitely in the Atlanta penitentiary or returning to Cuba, there are at least a fair number of people who at this point would prefer to go back to Cuba.
The hunger strike incident is the latest in a long series of problems that began when the Cubans arrived here 5 years ago. Officials say that such publicized incidents are likely to continue as long as the Cuban prisoner issue remains unresolved.
An E.F. Hutton internal investigation is implicating at least a dozen of the company's middle managers in a multi-million-dollar check-kiting scheme. Results from the probe conducted by former Attorney General Griffin Bell will be released later today. The company says it will impose penalties against the employees named in the report. In May, Hutton pleaded guilty to 2,000 counts of fraud involving check overdrafts. Rupert Murdoch is now a step closer to becoming a U.S. broadcasting mogul. This after the United States granted him citizenship. Dave Monsies reports the publishing tycoon will probably be a broadcast baron in this country as well.
Rupert Murdoch, owner of 80 publications worldwide, stood in a federal courtroom, renounced his Australian citizenship, and embraced his new naturalized status as an American. Then he left with his family in 2 limousines. Though he claims his years of empire building in America has made him feel like an American, naturalization is imperative for Murdoch if he is to take over the massive Metro Media Broadcasting Company. FCC rules say only an American can exercise complete hands-on control of a U.S. broadcasting company. He's offered $2 billion for Metro Media, which has TV stations in New York, Washington, Chicago, Los Angeles, and 3 other markets. Murdoch had talked of starting a new network, one which presumably would echo its owner's print policies, Murdoch newspapers that scream the day's headlines. But that's been put on hold while Murdoch works on the problems born out of the conflict he would have owning newspapers and TV stations in the same cities. The FCC largely bans such cross-ownerships, so Murdoch's asked the FCC for a 2-year waiver on the ban. Otherwise, Murdoch says he might be forced to sell off the New York Post and the Chicago Sun-Times at distress sale prices. The FCC decision is still months away. In the meantime, all Murdoch could do was raise his right hand, along with 185 other new citizens in the courtroom, and swear allegiance to the United States, a country that may give Murdoch his biggest profit yet.
More news after this.
Are you looking for something out of the ordinary? On the next evening, join us for a tour of Northern California's strangest places. Visit the primitive but practical underground house in Fresno. Get an inside look at San Jose's Winchester House. Explore the topsy-turvy mystery spot in Santa Cruz. And tour a Tahoe Castle with Pam Moore. We've got something strange for you on the next evening at 7:30 on KCRA TV, Channel 3.
On the next Donahue, church discipline.
They followed after me several times.
You saw your car in front of his apartment?
Yes.
The church threatened you with expulsion from their membership.
This sets up a kind of vigilante system.
Well, where you've got people running around spying whose driveway has got which car.
It's none of their business. She quit their church.
Church discipline, Thursday at 4 on KCRA TV, Channel 3.
No matter when the onset of blindness occurs, a blind person still has a great opportunity ahead of him.
I'm hoping to get a job as an entry-level programmer.
I'd like to get some kind of a secretarial job.
On my job, I do the same type of work as any sighted operator does.
You can do most anything if you really try hard enough.
The technology is there. It's just a matter of putting the two together.
Help Lions Clubs put the two together. Help yourself by employing the blind.
75 years ago, if you wanted to hold a reunion for all those Americans who have survived cancer, you could have held it in a hotel. 40 years ago, all the Americans who survived cancer would have needed a coliseum for their reunion. But today, if you wanted to hold a reunion for all those Americans who survived cancer, you'd need a city the size of Los Angeles. Please support the American Cancer Society. The battle isn't over, but we are winning.
It's 49 minutes past the hour. Time for Headline Sports.
This is Tom Steiner, Headline Sports. Another hot and windy day in New York where a major upset occurred at the U.S. Open. In a nearly 3-hour match, 16-year-old Steffi Graf battled back from a 2-game deficit in the final set to shock 4-seeded American Pam Shriver 7-6, 6-7, and 7-6.
You know, I'll be happy if I can try that hard in every match till I retire. I'll figure that's it. Shriver did her best.
Graf, the 11th seed from West Germany, will play Martina Navratilova Friday in the semis. Bidding for her third straight Open crown, Navratilova breezed past number 6 Zina Garrison in straight sets. The second seed won it easily in less than an hour, 6-2 and 6-3. In the men's draw, top seed John McEnroe moved a step closer to the finals by beating number 10 Joachim Nystrom in straight sets. The defending champion won the first 2 sets easily, 6-1, 6-love, then had to rally in the third set from 3 games down to win it. McEnroe's semifinal opponent will be Mats Wilander. The third seed advanced when number 6 Anders Jared walked off the court in the third set, not feeling well. Igor Paklin felt terrific after his world record. At the World University Games in Japan, the 22-year-old Russian set a world standard in the high jump, clearing 7 feet 10 3/4 inches. Back to the U.S. baseball, Wesleyan, California down Detroit 5-2. Second place KC stayed a game and a half back, down Chicago 6-5 and 10. Baltimore beat Oakland 6-1. Milwaukee tripped up Minnesota 11-10. East-leading Toronto fell to Cleveland 5-4. Second place Yankees beat Seattle 4-3. National League, Houston on top, Chicago 11-6. San Francisco squeaked past the Phillies 4-3. Pirates blanked the Braves 2-zip. East-leading St. Louis nipped Cincinnati 4-3 in the game. Pete Rose singled. He's now 5 shy of breaking Ty Cobb's all-time mark. Mets ripped San Diego 9-2, and the West-leading Dodgers doubled Montreal 4-2. Tom Steiner, Headline Sports.
I'm David Goodnow, and here's who's news. Meta Davis remembers the day well, the day she put a parking ticket on Paul McCartney's car.
He said, "Is your name really Meta?" So I said, "Yes." So he laughed, and he said, "That would make a nice jingle, Meta the Meter Maid, you see."
The rest, as they say, is musical history.
Standing by a parking meter, when I caught a glimpse of Rita, filling in the ticket in a little white book.
The Beatles changed Meta's first name for the song Lovely Rita Meter Maid. Meta Davis is now a grandmother, and after 19 years of writing tickets in London, she's decided to retire. By the way, Davis said she never bought the record written just for her. David Goodnow, Headline News.
In the headlines, school bells will ring in Chicago this morning 1 day late. Teachers have agreed to a 2-year contract, ending the shortest teacher strike in the city's history. But other strikes in 6 states are still keeping 150,000 students on vacation. A federal appeals court has thrown out the nation's first comparable worth ruling. This means the state of Washington does not have to offer women equal pay for equal jobs. And President Reagan meets today with his top foreign policy advisors to study what options he has in dealing with South Africa's white minority government. With the headlines, I'm Don Rooney.
Stay tuned. The news continues.
On a misty morning, when the fog is lifting, the amazing centuries of America the Beautiful rise to meet the day. The tree you plant and care for today will create beauty for all those who will follow. Celebrate Arbor Day and plant a tree, a joy forever. For more information, write the National Arbor Day Foundation, Nebraska City, Nebraska.
Dollars and Cents is brought to you by BMW, the ultimate driving machine. To arrange a thorough test drive, simply phone your nearest BMW dealer.
Every day, BMW presents a comprehensive report on the state of automotive technology, not through some dry dissertation or the theoretical vacuum of a laboratory, but rather through a more appropriate vehicle. The BMW 735i, the luxury sedan that translates the intricacies of technology into that very elusive commodity called fun.
In dollars and cents, there may be a worm of sorts in New York apples. The Environmental Protection Agency may issue an order putting the big freeze on apple crops. Jeannie Moss explains.
Growing apples is no bowl of cherries, and Andy Donato's Hudson Valley Farm is no Garden of Eden. 2 nights of sub-freezing temperatures 4 months ago, and now come harvest time, what you see is what you don't get.
No apples at all on this one.
But the trees at the orchard next door are heavy with apples.
You know, there's some nice large fruits on this tree.
Steve Clark's apples came through the freeze with flying colors, mainly because he invested $16,000 in a wind machine that kept warm air circulating when temperatures dropped. Freezes in the Hudson Valley and in Washington State, #1 in apple production, will result in only a slightly smaller crop this year nationwide. Bumper crops in other areas will pick up most of the slack, so consumer prices should be stable. But apple growers aren't out of the woods. There is an Environmental Protection Agency ban on the horizon, a proposed ban on a chemical known commercially as Alar.
It would be devastating for some growers not to have a chemical to prevent pre-harvest drop.
Alar has what's known in the business as a stop-drop quality,
which holds the apple on the tree longer during the late part of the harvest season and gives the apple a better chance to get better color, better sizing, and more importantly, to firm up the fruit.
But the EPA is worried that decades of eating Alar-treated apples may not keep the doctor away. On the contrary.
There's no question the animal data indicate that it is an oncogen, a cancer-causing agent in animals. Whether it causes cancer in humans, we can't say with certainty.
Though an independent panel of scientists must still analyze the data, orchard owners assume that Alar's days may be numbered, and with no substitute in sight, that could leave growers up a tree.
A long, dry summer down under is threatening Australia's crocodile population. The solution? Remove 100 snappy crocs from a depleted waterhole and relocate them. Virginia Westbury got the scoop.
It's been one of the driest seasons ever. This muddy, putrid hole in the middle of a dried-up creek bed on Escott Station is one of the casualties. It looks pretty empty, but beneath the surface, there's something else. They called it Operation Croc, possibly the biggest crocodile rescue ever attempted in Australia. Nearly 100 crocodiles were crowded into this tiny water hole, and they were fast running out of food and water. Escott's owner, Len Stolk, and his wife, Lynn, sounded the alarm. Two officers from the National Parks and Wildlife Service arrived to supervise the massive task of moving 100 cranky, reluctant crocs to new surroundings. Some of the crocs weren't too happy about the style of rescue. There were big ones and not so big. And one large animal who'd lost part of his jaw, probably the result of a gunshot wound. Peter Nevin, Escott's safari guide, says the crocs would have died if they hadn't been rescued.
It's as simple as that. The nearest water was about 15 miles away. So for them to travel that 15 miles, they'd get sunburnt, skin would burn off them. You'd never see them again.
Back at Escott, the wildlife officers measured, weighed and tagged the crocodiles before releasing them into their new salubrious surroundings. One thing's for certain, the Nicholson River is not likely to dry up for a very long time.
That's our report for this half hour. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Kavanagh. Around the world in 30 minutes, this is Headline News.
Celebrate the tasty onion with festival activities for the whole family, September 14th and 15th at the Vacaville Onion Festival. KCRA TV, Sacramento.
On the next Look Who's Talking.
Even though it's still warm outside, the light colors and fabrics of summer are quickly becoming distant memories. What's in store for us this fall? Join us on our next show for a fall preview with a nationally known fashion expert from iMagnums.
And we've not forgotten the young people. We'll get a special look at back-to-school fashions with Brenda Wells from JCPenney. I'm Jim Finnerty.
And I'm Sue Pearson. Join us Thursday at 9.
Delta 40. Copy of 450.
Crime or the fear of crime terrorizes thousands of Californians. When you realize that 1 out of 4 families will be victimized this year, you realize that any one of us could become a victim of crime. In the past, there wasn't much help.
But today, victims have people they can turn to. People who counsel and support. People who care. A victim can get help in many communities, from victim witness to child abuse programs, from domestic violence to rape crisis centers.
We must never forget that behind crime statistics, there is real-life human suffering. Working together, we can ensure that innocent victims receive every benefit and service available to them. If you're a victim of a crime or know someone who is, I urge you to call your local law enforcement agency or victim services program.
The good news is, more is being done to help the victims of crime.
Headline News, I'm Don Harrison. South Africa's violence takes on a new dimension. For the first time in a year, racial rioting has spread to white areas. Blacks and mixed-race youths threw gasoline bombs and stones at homes in white suburbs of Cape Town and East London this morning. One homeowner in Cape Town fought back with gunfire. Police say 2 youths among the roving crowd were killed. Sparks also flew between the Reverend Jerry Falwell and the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Those two appeared on national television last night debating American investments in South Africa. Falwell says American divestiture in companies there would hurt the blacks. But Jackson says U.S. investments rob South African blacks of their dignity.
The American corporations that are there, they're providing about 70,000 jobs, about 1%. There are about 22 million blacks there. And so 70,000 jobs is not a trade-off for the dignity of 22 million people. After all, in slavery, everybody had a job, but nobody had dignity, the right to vote.
To divest could actually put 10 to 12 million blacks, not only in South Africa, but outside in the surrounding black nations in hunger and starvation.
President Reagan also taking a fresh look at U.S. policy towards South Africa. He's expected to meet today with his National Security Council to discuss options in U.S. dealings with the South African government. Earlier in the day, the president travels to Raleigh, North Carolina as a stump for his tax reform plan. He plans to make a trip every week to promote his package. Tax reform also on the minds of congressmen just back from vacation. House Speaker Tip O'Neill says the House will try to pass a reform package, but it won't be easy. O'Neill says he's found very little sentiment in the House for the president's plan. Well, the Pentagon has scrubbed the first U.S. test of an anti-satellite weapon in space due to a timing problem. Congress wasn't given the full 15-day notification required. The test will be rescheduled later this month. The Soviet Union threatening to abandon its testing moratorium if President Reagan follows through. Ralph Begleiter reports this is putting Washington and Moscow on a collision course.
The Soviets issued their warning just as the congressional restriction on testing the American anti-satellite system was expiring. Any time now, but most likely not until later this month, the Pentagon will launch an F-15 fighter jet carrying a small missile. Once in the air, the missile will be fired at a piece of space junk, an old dead satellite, destroying it. The first test of the U.S. anti-satellite system against a target in space. Former Soviet leader Yuri Andropov announced a unilateral moratorium on anti-satellite weapons testing in 1983, but the Reagan administration insists the moratorium was a public relations ploy designed to freeze into place the Soviets' own advantage. During 2 rounds of arms talks in Geneva, sources say, the Soviets never mentioned the ASAT testing issue. But new Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev this week began complaining about the impending American test. Reagan administration officials say the Soviets are not worried about any military threat from the American test, but are just complaining about it now as just one more public relations string to pull before the November summit meeting.
American officials are not concerned about the Kremlin abandoning its testing moratorium. They say Moscow was only interested in a moratorium as long as the Kremlin controlled the world's only operational ASAT system.
It's back to reading, writing, and arithmetic for Chicago school students today. Teachers there ended their 2-day walkout yesterday, tentatively agreeing to a 2-year contract. They'll vote on the agreement September 19th. It calls for a 6% pay increase this year. The leader of the teachers union says she's happy the strike was a short one. Teachers in 6 other states aren't so lucky. More than 7,900 have walked out of the classroom and onto the picket lines. In Rhode Island, more than 12,000 students are out of school today. Barbara Hamilton reports on one town's struggle to keep education in the classroom.
In Newport, public school students were out playing instead of studying because their teachers were on strike.
No, I'm not suffering. Might as well enjoy it while I'm here.
I'd rather be here because the waves are really great and we can surf and everything. And if they don't have school until Monday, we don't have to get up real early to go to school.
The Teachers Association of Newport had voted to strike after the school committee rejected an arbitrator's recommendation for their contract. The teachers want what the arbitrator recommended, a 7% raise and a 3-year contract. The school committee says it can only afford a 4% raise and a 1-year contract.
We consider the entire package binding, actually, but one of our major points is that this is a 3-year contract, and that is binding as far as the association is concerned.
At the present time, we are planning to close tomorrow. We are asking the parents not to send any youngsters to school.
But then you're not asking the teachers to show up?
We are not expecting any teachers to report until this issue is resolved.
In the meantime, 328 teachers and 3,900 students are not in their classrooms. While the students are playing, the teachers are gathering among themselves to determine strategy.
A major setback for comparable worth. A federal appeals court has overturned a 1983 ruling that awarded back pay to female employees of Washington State. The women were paid less for jobs with similar skill requirements as male-dominated jobs. The judges said the plaintiffs failed to show any violation of the Civil Rights Act. The 1983 ruling awarded 15,000 women a total of $400 million. Are generic drugs just as good? The government thinks so and has just given 3 drug companies permission to copy the tranquilizer Valium. John Holloman reports the move is expected to benefit consumers through lower prices.
Beginning soon, users of the nation's most popular prescription tranquilizer Valium will be able to buy a cheaper generic form of the medicine. Valium will be able to buy a cheaper generic form of the medicine called diazepam. Health and Human Services Secretary Margaret Heckler says consumers could save up to $1 billion a year by purchasing generic rather than brand name drugs.
Consumers in our country who now take the leading prescription painkillers, the leading arthritis drug, the top high blood pressure drug, the top selling tranquilizers, can now save money by asking their physicians and pharmacists to prescribe and dispense generic versions of these products.
Secretary Heckler was joined by Food and Drug Administration researchers who say that generic drugs approved for sale are just as good as name brand products, a claim the major drug companies dispute.
One cannot assume and be correct that in every instance the brand name product and the generic are identical, because numerous studies have shown that they're not. I guess my own personal philosophy is there are 2 things that you don't take chances on. One are your medication and the other are parachutes.
The top-selling drugs now available in generic as well as name brand versions include 4 which are widely used to control high blood pressure and other cardiovascular problems, 3 painkillers, a major antibiotic, in addition to the widely used Valium. Experts say consumers should be able to buy the Valium substitute at prices 35% cheaper than the name brand version. Food and Drug Administration officials say the generic Valium is already in trucks waiting for distribution to drugstores within the next few hours. And they say within the next 6 months, as many as 3 dozen additional drugs will be offered in cheaper generic varieties.
Ahead on Headline News, Elena victims get a helping hand.
If you're a businessman or woman with the brains, drive, and desire to run a growing company, Inc., the magazine for growing companies, invites you to call now for a free copy of its Guide to Small Business Success. Here's a special report packed with the kind of hard-nosed, how-to business savvy you find in every issue of Inc. That's INC, period. With Inc.'s Guide to Small Business Success, you'll profit from more than 100 proven techniques to help your business grow. Like a handy 9-point checklist for tracking day-to-day business operations, 8 rules for cutting paperwork and streamlining office systems, a dozen ways to borrow money, and more. And the Guide to Small Business Success is yours free just for subscribing to Inc. at the money-saving trial rate of $18 for 1 full year. Then each month, you'll profit from Inc.'s special brand of hands-on management advice, facts, news, and ideas that quickly get down to business. Ideas you can put to work at once, such as how to take the guesswork out of hiring, what to do and not to do if you're in for an IRS audit, where to find top-grade business software free, why smart companies are saying no to venture capital, and when to defer salary for your good and the company's. Plus insights into the business news straight from the men and women who make it news, colorful, compelling case histories, and personal success stories that'll stir you up, spur you on, and maybe even spare you some unnecessary grief. So call today for 12 monthly issues of ink at just $18, including 2 big special issues celebrating America's fastest-growing companies. You'll save 25% off the regular rate, fully half off the cover price. There's no risk. Not satisfied? Just cancel for a full refund. 800-345-8000. Toll-free 800-345-8000. And you'll get Ink's Guide to Small Business Success absolutely free. That's 800-345-8000. Ink Magazine pays for the call. 800-345-8000. Call now.
Battered by Hurricane Elena, the Mississippi coast is getting some federal help. President Reagan has declared the region a disaster area, freeing up millions of dollars in assistance for storm victims. Mark Domich has more on their plight.
We'll be ready for visitors, I think, early next week.
Biloxi Mayor Gerald Blessey is in a hurry. Without vacationers and conventioners, this Gulf Coast town loses millions of dollars. 48 hours after Hurricane Elena struck, the city is still a long way from being normal. Power, electricity, is the key.
The pressure is not above the first floor. We still have problems with hospitals getting pressure. If we can get all the electricity back on, the pressure will come back up. It's kind of a chicken and the egg, you know.
These electrical workers are putting in 12, 16-hour days, and slowly but surely, the air conditioners are clicking on. Water, clean enough to drink, and water pressure is the other major problem in Biloxi. All the roads have been cleared of trees and debris, but driving is often a bit risky in some areas. The National Guard has taken over at major intersections. The traffic signal lights are still out. All grocery stores and supermarkets were able to open up Wednesday morning. There were still some problems with refrigerated goods, but Biloxi still has a problem trying to feed everyone.